Mr.
Good
Hold
morning.
on a second. Hold on 1 second.
Mr. Chair, I think she's here to speak about the adult dental program. Is she here to speak about the dental?
Are you here to speak about the adult dental program?
No, sir. I'm here to speak about cameras in the classroom.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry for the interruption.
Good morning. My name is Vivian Webb. I am 16 years old and I live in Shreveport up in Caddo Parish with my family. 2 of my brothers and I have autism. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. I've come here today to ask you why there is still no definite funding source for cameras in our special education classrooms. I came down here several years ago before the pandemic when we were asking for the first bill that would allow cameras to get installed in our special education classrooms if our parents asked for it. It didn't pass that time, but in 2021, Act 456 did finally get passed. Act 456 is supposed to require the adoption of policies relative to the installation and operation of cameras in the special education classroom upon parent request, but parents still can't get the school districts to install cameras yet. When you passed it, it got unanimous support from both the Senate and the House, so what happened? Why don't we have those cameras in our classroom yet? I came down to the Capitol a few weeks ago with the rest of the yellow shirts to attend a Senate Education Committee meeting where we talked about SB 45, which would give the school districts a deadline to develop those policies that Act 456 requires, because so far they aren't really being developed yet. While we were here, we heard from parents who had their kids hurt by the adults in their classroom at school. One of the incidences is actually about a teacher kicking a kindergarten student during nap time while they were taking a nap. From what I understand, these kids are nonverbal and couldn't even tell anybody what happened. Their moms talked about how they had to use a recording device to even find out what was really happening because their kids kept coming home hurt and nobody could tell them why. Another lady from up in our region talked about how a principal at her school struck a student that was having behavior problems in class. That isn't right. These incidences have been happening for a very long time in our schools, and they shouldn't be. When I was 5, I watched another student bully my nonverbal brother almost the entire school year. When I would try and tell our teacher what was happening, I would get punished for it with bad behavior marks. She would even skip me when it was my turn to get water or other treats. But this did not stop me from trying to be a voice for my brother who couldn't use his yet. In 2nd grade, we had a classmate who would come to school every day and pretend to shoot at the teacher and the students before he would sit down for class, if he would even sit down for class. Some days, this little boy would get so angry, he would throw his chair around the room, and one day it almost hit me and my brother. We sat next to each other with our desks touching, and the chair landed in between us. It was very scary. Our other brother, Caden, didn't understand what was happening, and he was so scared he thought he was really going to die. He thought that this little boy was going to shoot him because that was what he pretended to do to us every single day, often multiple times each day. Teacher did try to help protect us. She knew we were scared and didn't really understand what was happening or why. She would send this kid to the office for discipline, and the principal would send him right back to class as if nothing was happening. It went on for months. My mom finally had to write the director of special education for the parish before anything was done to help everybody. The teacher was so upset she was even taking personal days over it just to get through the school year. Sometimes it's us kids who need protecting, and sometimes it's the adults who could be better protected if they could help these kids. Cameras would be a huge help if only we could get them into the classrooms. Teachers can't always see everything that happens in a classroom because they are teaching, but cameras could help identify all sorts of problems and help everybody find solutions. Cameras would help the students and protect the staff. Having cameras could help teachers and staff find a way to make kids feel more comfortable in class, and that would mean everybody can learn better and our parents wouldn't have to worry as much. The school system do not seem to want us to have these cameras, though. When parents have asked to have cameras installed and about the policies for them, they don't seem to be getting answers. School boards are actually telling parents that they don't believe the cameras are a good idea and that they violate the privacy of students they are supposed to be protecting. This doesn't really even make sense because Act 456 is a law. I'm taking civics in this school year, and they're teaching us that state laws don't get to be questioned by school boards. That is what appears to be happening here. A few weeks ago, Senate Education Committee requested that Education Board representatives find out how many schools have developed these policies and how many schools have actually have cameras in their special education classrooms. They even suggested they find the money to fund cameras, given that it really isn't a huge amount of money in the first place. An amendment for some funding was added into the budget, but it isn't a guaranteed funding source, and it's contingent, which means that it cannot be counted on to actually happen at all. If the law was important enough to pass unanimously in the first place, then why not ensure that the funding for the cameras is covered and really there and not just contingent with all these stipulations? What I need for you to do is please find a definite funding source for SB 45 so that the school districts will stop telling our parents no when they ask for cameras in the classroom. School systems keep telling parents how they won't go to the trouble of developing that cameras policy until policymakers go to the trouble of finding funding for the cameras. That isn't right. Sarah White, didn't you tell the education department a few weeks ago that cameras are an important investment for those children and their parents? That they should try and find a way to finance the cameras? Sir, I think you even said that the $6 million seems like a reasonable ask. I would like to remind you that both the Senate and the House passed the original bill unanimously last session, and that I must have found us students with special needs in our education to be an important investment. This is why I am here to ask that you please add in a definite and permanent source of funding for the creation of policies that govern camera placement in special education classroom upon parent request under Act 456. Thank you for letting me speak today.
Well, thank you, Vivian. And I was in that meeting. And I think we passed out about $1 billion of unfunded mandates in that meeting. And that's the reason it hasn't been done. We told the school boards to do it, okay? But there's a law that kind of supersedes that. That's called an unfunded mandate. We, the legislature, mandate upon a lower branch of government to do something, and we don't finance it. So that means anything we tell them to do, we have to finance it. So that's another $4 to $6 million for those cameras. I think, from what I'm hearing from my committee, we may find that money before the end of the session, okay? But it's their classrooms. It's a local school district. We already appropriate $4 billion a year for the minimum foundation plan, which pays for your education at those public schools, okay, or pays the biggest part, the state part. So it's never whether we want to or whether it's right or wrong. It's whether we can afford it. And then year to year, that's what we wrestle with on this committee. What can we afford this committee? If you've been sitting here, not one bad request come to this committee, not one bad one. But we have to weigh what we can afford every year. What can we afford? And we only have X amount of dollars to deal with. That's why some programs have to wait a year or two, or sometimes 3 or 4 years before we finally get the money and everything falls in place to pay for it. They don't teach you that in civics, but that's what happens in these finance committees, okay? Thank you. Senator Henry.
Yeah, Ms. Webb, no, thank you very much for coming. And I'm sure we'll be able to find the funding to take care of the camera issue. One of the things that, and I'm talking to you, but then everybody behind you, everybody else listening, is one of the things that Senator Abraham brought up is that the schools had until January of 2023 to come up with a policy. But what seems to be the issue is they're not even going to attempt the policy until we give them the funding. So what we're going to do is we'll give them the funding and then really hold their feet to the fire as it relates to putting the cameras in. So I think we're all just kind of sitting up here going, who has problems? But we all voted for it, so you're correct there. So thank you very much for coming. I also wanted to let all the members know that Ms. Polito, the lady sitting next to you, about 3, maybe 4 years ago, she came to my office when I was a state representative to meet about possibly running for my seat since I was term limited. And she wasn't going to run against me. It was an open seat. And we met for about 30 minutes, and I explained to her what it was like to be a legislator and the time constraints and the issues she would have with her business and her children. And as you can see now, she is not sitting on this side. She's sitting on that side, because after that meeting, she never mentioned running for office ever again. So it does help to meet with your elected officials before you decide to run for office, because it didn't work out. She wasn't as excited about running for office after she left the meeting. So I just want to thank you all for coming. And Ms. Webb, thank you very much for coming, and we'll take care of your problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Fessy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to thank you so much for coming and testify to tell us that we cannot not afford to make sure we get some money on these cameras. So we're going to do everything we can do. I just wanted to say that I'll be a very big advocate to making sure we get the money for these cameras. And thank you so much for coming to testify.
So you got that note, Sherry? Okay. Senator Tarver?
I agree that Caddo Parish definitely need the cameras in the classroom, and we're going to make sure that it happens this time.
It may take a year or so before everything falls in place, okay? You can't, they don't teach you this in civics either. The government doesn't run very fast. It's a slow process, but it's almost intentional. You don't want to make a lot of mistakes when you're legislating and changing laws and moving. So, Senator Cloud?
Ms. Webb, what they probably have told you in civics is that this is your state house. This building belongs to you, and this legislature works for you. And so I just want to commend you for coming and sitting before us and expressing yourself. And I'm reminded of maybe 10 years ago where I was sitting just where you were, just as an ordinary citizen, testifying on things that mattered to me. And now I'm on this side. And so maybe one day you'll be on this side too. I see capability of it, for sure.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Thank you, Senator Cloud. So wait, don't leave yet.
Oh, show me.
So you can see there's still hope for you to sit on this side of the desk, okay?
Talking to her.
No. It just you may have to let your kids grow up a little bit and get
That's
your
right.
business on. I was a little older before I ever ran, but this is my 20th year, so
Wow.
it takes a while.
Thank you.
All right. I was a little younger. All right, thanks.